mentioned to me about organizing such a course, I said, are you crazy? We have had this topic so many times, but it's clear that the people want to know, and the people in a sense are voting that it is time that there's a proper implementation of prediction and prevention of preeclampsia. I'm very glad that we have our colleagues here from Denmark, the first most civilized, scientifically sound country of the world, because 30 years ago, when we were advocating screening for Down syndrome, using the first semester combined test, and everybody was so very much against, the Danes took it up, and they proved that it can be useful and it can be implemented on a national basis. And now they are implementing routine screening for preeclampsia for the whole country. So we are very anxiously waiting to see the results that no doubt will act as a stimulus for more countries to follow. But let's just go through things quickly, really. Why is it important? Because preeclampsia kills women and babies. More than 75,000 women, more than 500,000 babies die every year in the world. And that's too many deaths for us to sit back and feel comfortable with our lack of action, lack of activism to ensure that people are imposing screening for preeclampsia in all countries of the world. Now, it has taken 30 years to put into practice a model that is very similar to what you had 30 years ago in screening for Down syndrome. And this model does what? It combines information from the medical history. How old are you? What is your weight? Are you black or are you Asian? Did you have preeclampsia before? Does your mother have preeclampsia? And so on. And then we combine that with a series of biomarkers. And among the hundreds of biomarkers that we and others have investigated over the decades, there are 3, plus another one that I will talk to you at the end about, that are useful. And these are uterine artery Doppler in the first semester, mean arterial pressure, and placental growth factor. And this triple test has been compared to what is the practice in England, NICE guidelines, American college guidelines, and every other village of the world's guidelines, which is based on a 50-year-old ideology of risk scoring. And the pink histograms are from risk scoring, and the blue histograms are from the combined test. And you can see that whatever it is that the outcome is that we are looking for, the detection rate is twice as much with the triple test than the risk scoring system. The rest of the story is really boring. There's only one element that keeps coming up, and that is that we are in England. England has an enormous amount of money to invest in nuclear weapons, and not enough is left for medicine. And therefore, placental growth factor, which is only about £5 per patient, we cannot afford to give to our population. We can afford to invest in nuclear weapons so that they kill everybody, but they don't have £5 to prevent them from dying by incorporating PLGF in our screening. There are other countries, like in the United States, where what matters is who gets paid amongst our profession for offering something. Because uterine artery Doppler is not funded by the system, they don't like doing Doppler in the United States, but they have money to measure PLGF and everything else. So the question is, if you cannot measure uterine artery, or you cannot measure PLGF, what then? Well, there are 2 simple options, really. You accept that the detection rate is a bit less than with the triple test, or in screening you can do something different. You say, okay, we still want to have a detection rate of 90%, but in order to get 90%, we don't need to have a screen positive rate of 10%. We up it to 15%. And since screen positivity means you take aspirin, well, it's not a big deal. So, if you are poor like in England, or incompetent like the United States, don't worry about doing everything. Just do only 2 of the 3 things. And then you can still achieve a high performance of screening, but just with a bit of an increase in the screen positive rate. And that's that. Nothing more sophisticated than that. What about prevention of preeclampsia by aspirin? If you look at the literature, it's littered with a number of useless studies where they used all sorts of different definitions of preeclampsia. They had all sorts of entry criteria for treatment. They had different starting gestational age from 0 weeks to 38 weeks. Patients were being wheeled into the operating theater to have cesarean section. They were giving them aspirin, hoping that would stop the preeclampsia from happening in the next 5 minutes. Absurd studies. And then they mixed up all of these heterogeneous and useless studies to show that aspirin was not particularly useful. And then the chairman here, together with Leona, they did this. Nothing very sophisticated, really, but it takes balls to do things properly. They screened 27,000 women. They identified through the triple test the high-risk group. And then they randomized them into aspirin, a proper dose, not psychotherapeutic dose, 150 milligrams per day from 12 to 36 weeks against placebo. It was very obvious, really, and incredible. In the group that received aspirin, they reduced the rate of the most severe type of preeclampsia, the preeclampsia that kills women and babies, because they develop it and they live it before 32 weeks, 90% drop. And 60% drop of preterm preeclampsia. No impact on term preeclampsia. Boring to talk about anything else. Mega results, fantastic evidence. I cannot imagine why societies with toilets and electricity like England, toilets and electricity sometimes like the United States of America, they have not implemented this method of screening and prevention with their populations because they don't care. The next question really is very, very important. And that is aspirin potentially dangerous? Especially at the dose of 150 milligrams per day. Can it produce hemorrhagic events? Well, we know that old men like me that take aspirin every day have a higher risk of dying from brain hemorrhages and gastrointestinal hemorrhage. So aspirin can produce some hemorrhagic events. There's no good evidence that the same is happening during pregnancy, but that's not all the same. The question is, do we need to give aspirin throughout pregnancy, or can we give it up to a certain gestation, let's say 24 weeks, and then stop it? And that is a question that will be answered in 2 years from now in a study funded by Bill Gates, where we will take 80,000 women, mainly in England and Spain. We will screen with a triple test at 12 weeks. But instead of using a risk cutoff of 1 in 100, and therefore a screen positive rate of 10%, we go for a screen positive rate of 30%. And the risk cutoff is 1 in 250. And then what? Well, give 30% of the population aspirin at 12 weeks, and then randomize the women into 2 groups. One group that stops the aspirin at 24 weeks, and another group where the aspirin is continued. If, and you have no idea if this is going to be the case, aspirin stopping at 24 weeks is as good as aspirin continuing, that will be very important. Why is that? Because we can give aspirin to a much higher proportion of the population early on, but you can stop it as the weeks go by. And the importance of that is that instead of a detection rate of about 75% of preterm preeclampsia with a screen positive rate of 10%, when you go to a screen positive rate of 30%, the detection of preterm preeclampsia goes up to 90%. And also, potentially you have an impact on term preeclampsia, going up from 40 to 71%. We'll find out in 2 or 3 years, and then we can discuss it again. Something that really irritates me. There are many countries of the world, in Latin America, Africa, and so on, that have been abused by this nice-looking logo in the bottom left of my slide. The World, very megalomaniac type of title, World Health Organization, the Boys and Girls of Geneva. They say it is very, very important to take calcium because calcium helps the risk of preeclampsia. So, wow. Let us look at the evidence. The evidence is based, extraordinarily, on 13 studies, not less and not more, on a total of 15,000 women, published in this Cochrane library every 3 years by the same group of people as if they were desperate to improve their CV by publishing the same things again and again and again. 2002, 2006, 2010, 2014, calcium is fantastic. It helps more than half the rate of preeclampsia. And then copy and paste by the boys and girls from Geneva say, we strongly recommend everybody in Africa, everybody in China, everybody in Brazil, even the people of Cyprus, but the people of Cyprus wouldn't listen to such rubbish, must take calcium because it's really, really good. And we said so in 2011 and 2016. They think that by repeating the same old rubbish enough time, maybe people will believe them. Let us look at the evidence. Is there any evidence that this is true? Is there any evidence? You would have thought that there is. This is the evidence. Remember, 13 studies, a total of 15,000 women. These are the studies. The biggest study is by this guy called Villar. 4,000 in each arm, a total of 8,000 women, and they have no evidence that calcium works. The next biggest study is by Levine. Levine is a very famous guy that unfortunately died a few years ago. He's the guy that brought into attention the importance of FLIT and PLGF. 4,500 women, no evidence at all that it works. And then, Sanchez Ramos, 60 women. Calcium is fantastic. Lopez Jaramillo, 100 cases, really, really good. A couple of years later, Lopez Jaramillo, 250 women, fantastic. And then you say, what is wrong with everybody? There's another one. Niromanesh from Iran. 30 women, really good. And then they put all of this rubbish into a pot, and they melt them up, and they give the same importance to Niromanesh with Villar. And they come to the ridiculous conclusion that calcium is really good. Calcium is useless, has always been useless, and will always be useless because there's no evidence that it's useful. Full stop. Will it continue to be used? Of course it will be used. Last month I was in a conference in Brazil. They were very traumatized when I said they must stop advocating rubbish because it's in their guidelines. Therefore they think that it is very, very important because the WHO was that it's important. I said, yeah, you're right. Niromanesh lives and will live forever. Long live Niromanesh. Next. What about 20 weeks? If we screen at 12 weeks, and you pick up 75% of preeclampsia before 37 weeks, and you give aspirin, we remove 60%. What is then happening? There's still a lot of preeclampsia around. So, when we see women at a routine 20-week scan, we assess their risk again. Nothing very sophisticated. We do an ultrasound scan and we measure the estimated fetal weight. The estimated fetal weight is a very good biomarker of preeclampsia. And we measure their blood pressure. Nothing very expensive. And then we can stratify women into those that have an extremely high risk of developing preeclampsia in the next 3 to 4 weeks. We give them a blood pressure machine to monitor their blood pressure at home and so on. And then we review everybody at 36 weeks. Let's talk about term preeclampsia. It's much more common than preterm preeclampsia, and although individually the risks are less for each case, because there's a hell of a lot more term preeclampsia than preterm preeclampsia, the overall contribution to severe hypertension, maternal mortality, and morbidity is much greater. So term preeclampsia does matter. What can we do? Well, it's a disaster, isn't it? First trimester screening picks up very few. First trimester screening and aspirin prevents none. So what is the story here? Well, we need to screen at 36 weeks. I'm not going to talk today about the value of doing a routine scan at 36 weeks for all sorts of reasons. At 36 weeks, combination of blood pressure, PLGF, and FLIT can identify a high risk group. And then we did this study really, where if your risk is extremely high, we deliver you at 37 weeks, and less so 38, 39, 40, and so on. And over a period of a year and a bit, we took 8,000 women and we randomized them into 2 groups. In one group, we managed them as usual, and in the other group, we timed their birth based on their risk. And we reduced the rate of term preeclampsia by 30% without increasing the rate of cesarean section or neonatal unit admission. Now, I was very depressed when I saw these results, because 30%, I said, come on. Daniel showed a 60% reduction of preterm preeclampsia. They're pathetic. We come 10 years later and we show a 30% reduction. Now, when you think about it, because there's a hell of a lot more term preeclampsia than preterm preeclampsia, a 30% reduction actually is more than a 60% reduction of preterm preeclampsia. So it is important. That's number one. The second point is that when you do research, you learn things. And unless you're blind, when you finish with a project, you get excited to do the next project. This data, I was told, will eventually be published in the next 2 months. In saying, by you looking at the overall result, that we reduce the rate of term preeclampsia without increasing the rate of cesarean section, neonatal unit admission, in a sense you were cheating a bit, because we were looking at the overall results. When it did a sub-analysis, according to the gestational age of delivery, something different emerged. Red is intervention, orange or green is control. In the 37-week stratum, actually, we did increase the risk of neonatal unit admission. And also at 38 weeks, even at 39 weeks. It's only in those born at 40 weeks plus that we are reducing the rate of NICU admission. The same, unfortunately, was true for emergency cesarean section. In the group delivering at 37 weeks, we are actually increasing the rate of emergency cesarean section. So, we are now, next month, starting a new study which is more simple. We will screen again as previously at 37 weeks. We will now identify a high-risk group, 1 in 5, which is about 4 to 5% of the population. And instead of delivering at 37 and 38 weeks, we will monitor them very, very carefully. We'll give them a blood pressure machine to monitor their blood pressure every day at home. And if they develop high blood pressure, or there's evidence that they're developing preeclampsia, then we bring them in and deliver them. Otherwise, we try to prolong the pregnancy to 39 weeks. At the other end of the spectrum, again, we don't aim to deliver people at 41 weeks anymore. That's quite a primitive way of practicing obstetrics nowadays. But bring the women to deliver at 39 weeks. We hope that we will substantially reduce not only the rate of preeclampsia, but also now prevent the rates of these adverse events. Let me now finish off with something simple in the next 5 minutes. We spend a hell of a lot of time in the last 20 years telling people that uterine Doppler is very simple. It doesn't really matter what we say. I was a medical student. I know that nobody believes that I was ever a medical student. I was born a professor. But a few decades ago, I was a medical student at King's. My teacher was Professor Campbell, with an 88-year-old brilliant mind of an 18-year-old. The dangerous people of obstetrics are the 35-year-olds who are just qualified and they're about to become consultants, and they're so very conservative that I can't believe that they will rule the world for the next 50 years. Campbell is 18 years old. Campbell, the early 1980s, published in The Lancet that looking at the uterine artery is critically important in the prediction of all sorts of pregnancy outcomes. 20 years ago, when Aristotle was my fellow, we published here how, and Christoph Lies, again, they were at King's as fellows, and we published that we should do routine uterine artery Doppler 20 weeks on everybody, so that can predict preeclampsia, smallness, abruption, all sorts of pregnancy complications. It doesn't really matter what we say. In England, our country, nobody is doing uterine artery. It's so complicated, so very complicated. And the midwives that run, and the sonographers that run our system are so very stressed and so very overwhelmed. And 50 years have passed out, and they cannot find the uterine artery. So, oh dear. Maybe they will retire soon, and that generation will die, and a new generation will come, and then they will not find it so difficult. But you know what? The new generation is worse than the old generation. So what can we do? We'll accept that England will never introduce routine uterine artery Doppler. Most other societies will, but not England, and not America, my God. What can we do? Well, we can do this. Watch. Put a bit of gel on the transducer, ask the patient to close their eyes, and put the transducer on their eye. There is a big black circle, believe it or not, that is the orbit. With the color on, and you get a waveform. That's a miracle. Only one vessel, but there are two eyes, so you have to repeat it to get more reproducible results. Is that any good? It's extremely easy to learn. Even the English sonographers can learn it in a few seconds. They cannot find an excuse, and they are very confused, and very busy, and they cannot do it, and it's so complicated. Oh my God, my God, my God. Anybody can do that. But is it useful, is the question. The answer is yes. Because the blue line is normality. The red circles are from women that will subsequently develop preeclampsia after a few days, few weeks, or a few months. And if we look at 12 weeks, in this large study, we found that 4,000 women, that the performance of screening using the uterine artery is exactly the same as that using the ophthalmic artery. So that's good. Something more important is this. I'm allergic to the word AI. Everything nowadays AI. Even going to the toilet.
Lo siguiente, porque la Asociación Privada de Predicciones, la Asociación de FPs, ha dado a conocer ya el cronograma de retiro de estos 4 UIT 2025, ese octavo retiro. Recordaremos que recientemente fue aprobado por el Congreso y promulgado por el Ejecutivo. Acá está el cronograma, dice: conoce el cronograma para realizar el registro de tu solicitud del retiro de hasta 4 UITs. Este retiro, dice, este registro se va a iniciar el próximo 21 de octubre y próximamente van a seguir informando la ruta para que se pueda realizar este retiro. En principio lo que usted tiene que hacer es identificar el número final, el dígito final de su documento nacional de identidad. Ahí está la letra. Si su DNI concluye con el dígito 0, usted tiene que hacer el registro del 21 a 22 de octubre, ¿no? Registrar la solicitud, perdón, el 22 de octubre, ¿no? El registro de la solicitud del retiro, de una de estas fechas, 22, 23 y 20 de noviembre. Ahí está la fecha, ¿no? Si su DNI, por el contrario, concluye o termina en número 1, usted tiene que hacer el registro de su solicitud de retiro en el 24 de octubre, el 27 de octubre o el 21 de noviembre, y así sigue justamente los números.
One of the questions that has appeared a couple of times in the chat is about prediction and prevention preeclampsia in twins. I wonder if you could say a few words about
tienen un alcance de hasta 245. Este es probablemente el micrófono más curioso y mejor pensado que ha pasado por mis manos. Estamos hablando del Sennheiser Profile Wireless. Tienen un alcance de hasta 245 metros, grabación interna a 32 bits y además son convertibles. Son dos micrófonos inalámbricos que se meten en una barra que te sirve de base de carga y también para utilizarlo como micro de mano. Esto es una sesión de mis amigos de Camaralia, no es una mención pagada ni nada por el estilo. Me cedieron esta unidad y voy a seguir cobrando el mismo pastizal si lo pongo a caer de un burro. Es decir, no voy a cobrar nada, cero. Pero vamos primeramente por el unboxing con un poquito de especificaciones técnicas cuando estamos aquí en este entorno tan bucólico. Esta vez estoy en el mismo campo de pruebas de micrófonos inalámbricos, pero estoy en el otro lado. Ahora mismo estoy en el agarrobo, a donde voy en las otras pruebas, y esta vez voy a hacer la prueba al revés porque hace un sol de justicia ahora mismo y me voy a ir caminando hacia allá para poner a prueba el alcance de estos micrófonos de Sennheiser. En la caja tenemos un estuche de tela que guarda en su interior otro estuche que en realidad sirve para guardar los micros, pero también para usarlos como micrófonos de mano. De hecho, ahora mismo estoy utilizando estos micrófonos. Hace un poquito de viento. He de decir que esta vez no tenemos cancelación de ruido por inteligencia artificial ni nada por el estilo, pero estamos en 2025 y hoy en día ya tenemos soluciones incluso gratuitas que te limpian el sonido utilizando la inteligencia artificial, que funcionan francamente bien. Ahora mismo estoy grabando de directamente en uno de los micrófonos. Se puede activar la grabación desde el receptor y todo el audio que vas a escuchar de este vídeo son de los Profile Wireless. Eso sí, aplicando un poquito de ecualización en algunos momentos. Ahora mismo estás escuchando el audio sin absolutamente ningún tratamiento. Un poquito de cuerpecillo, ¿no? Hay un poquito de punch, ¿no? Pero cuando le aplicamos una ecualización, gracias a que tenemos grabación a 32 bits, pues ahí ya tenemos un audio con mucho más cuerpo. Tenemos puesto el peluche y si quito el peluche, pues vamos a escuchar un sonido imposible de salvar seguramente. Así que el peluche, que viene incluido ya, por cierto, es indispensable para este micrófono. Aparte de esa espuma que tenemos peluches para cada uno de los emisores. Cada uno de los emisores es grabador, tiene un micrófono y se le puede acoplar un peluchito que trae incorporado y que se puede poner muy fácilmente. Con ese peluche puesto, pues ya tenemos ahí una pantalla de viento y hará que no se cuele esos sonidos indeseados de viento. En el estuche de tela tenemos además un cable USB-C a USB-C para conectar a un smartphone. Es compatible tanto con Android como con iPhone. Tenemos un cable jack 3,5 milímetros TRS macho a macho para conectar a una cámara, por ejemplo, como yo voy a hacer ahora mismo. De hecho, voy a cambiar a la configuración de grabación en cámara directamente utilizando el receptor y vamos a poner a prueba el sistema de emisión por wireless de estos micrófonos Sennheiser Profile Wireless. Así que a la de una, a la de dos. ¡Pumba! Pues aquí estamos ya entonces grabando con el micrófono de corbata colocado directamente en mi camiseta. Una cosa que me ha encantado.
So what are the markers really? First of all, we have information from the history. The older you are, the heavier you are. If you are black in South Africa, in South Asia, if you conceived by IVF, if you had a pregnancy with preeclampsia before, if your mother had preeclampsia, if you start off with a pregnancy with chronic hypertension, diabetes, and SLE, those are the history components, and they are true, both for preterm and term preeclampsia. And then the biomarkers. Blood pressure. Blood pressure is hypertension, so that's always useful. PLGF is always useful because it indicates how the placenta is not functioning so well if it's low. And the big difference really is the uterine artery useful for preterm, but not for term preeclampsia, and FLIT, which is useful in predicting imminent preeclampsia that will happen after 2 to 3 weeks. Therefore, that is useful for term.
Thank you very much. There was another question about why not give aspirin to everybody, but I will address that in my talk. So
I think you should do that.
Thank you.
Also address the question, Daniel, on the study that we are just working on now, on chronic hypertension, because we made a mistake in our original applications where we said that aspirin doesn't work in chronic hypertension, but actually it does work. So you can perhaps address that in the discussion.
Yes.
So, thank you very much, everybody. I hope that you have learned something. Thank you, Leona and Daniel, for being around with us. All the best.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.